Hello. Today I am going to sit and talk about illicit fentanyl poisoning and awareness with Shelby. She runs a nonprofit organization called talkaboutTy.org. And today we're going to be sharing a little bit of this story between how both of us lost our brothers to fentanyl poisoning, and we'll just kind of see what goes from there. So, my brother was 33, I believe, maybe 34, when he was poisoned by fentanyl. How old was yours?
Ty was 22, so he died 18 days shy of his 23rd birthday.
18 days shy of his 23rd birthday. And did he struggle with a substance abuse issue?
So that's kind of hard to, it's hard to gauge because in 2016, Ty had his first shoulder surgery. So Ty was an athlete in high school, and he even played some college football as well at UCO. So he injured himself in high school, and after he got a scholarship, he had his first surgery. He was overprescribed Oxycontin at that point. He did develop an issue with it. I don't necessarily remember how he got out of that. I know that it no longer became an issue somehow. And then Ty eventually had another surgery, which he wasn't overprescribed Oxycontin or anything. And then he died a month prior to having his third shoulder surgery. So
no.
Not really. He never had to go to rehab. He never missed work. He
partied.
Right. Yeah.
And so how did he become in contact with, and what avenue was it that he took the fentanyl?
So, and this is what makes Ty's case very interesting, is Ty had a friend who was a firefighter, and they grew up together, and the firefighter reached out to Ty and had said, "Hey, I'm getting some Roxy's. Do you want one?" And Ty was like, sure. And the friend came over. This is Mother's Day of 2020.
Okay.
So May 10th, the friend comes over, gives Ty an Oxy. They play video games, whatever. He leaves. The friend actually dies. He starts, actively overdosing at like 10:30 at night on May 10th. Oh, and he lived at home with his parents, and he was just watching. I mean, it's Mother's Day. He's just watching a movie with his girlfriend or whatnot. And he's pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. And then based on when we found Ty on the 11th, we think that Ty probably took his pill around 1. So it actually killed both of them. And something that I make sure to bring up whenever I'm doing any kind of public speaking is I don't know why my brother took the pill. And my brother and I, we were really, really, really close. And I mean, I know that he had struggled with depression for a little bit. He's 22 and you're 22, and he just quit school, and he was working at a flower nursery. So it's like, he's trying to figure that out. So was he depressed? I don't know, maybe. Was he wanting to get high? Maybe. Was he in pain? Maybe. Was it because he's just 22 and his friend offered? Maybe. And the firefighter had gotten it from a guy that they had gone to school with. So, yeah.
And do you think that him having surgery and having been overprescribed at one point probably contributed to?
I think somewhat. I mean, he knew how it was going to make him feel.
Yeah.
So I think a little bit, but I also think that, with him being 22 and he was very social, had a lot of friends, went to parties. He was, I think he was bound to try it.
Right.
Regardless.
In my day of partying, pills was not something that I was comfortable doing, but they would have a bowl and people would just throw.
I remember hearing about that.
I mean it. They would throw just anything that they found in a medicine cabinet, in a purse,
That's
in a
crazy.
cabinet. I'm not kidding you. This is what they did. And so people would be drinking and they're taking the stuff, and it's like, no way.
That makes me nervous just hearing it. Not even for the
Right.
sake of dying, but for the sake of, I envision myself drinking, hanging out, knowing I just took something and being like,
Right.
am I about to freak out? Am I going to go to sleep? Am I going to pee my pants? Am I going to start seeing stuff? You know.
But so I mean, the thing
It's so crazy.
I think with whenever we are talking about people who have done something to contribute towards their demise, I think that sometimes we need to think about what they're self-medicating, because my brother, for example, he started with substance abuse by the time he was, I would say, full-on addicted to angel dust by the time he was 13, 14.
Really?
Yeah. Sherm, he did angel dust, PCP, anything, but meth was kind of his drug of choice at that point. And so whenever he went through all of his rehabs and all of his things and homelessness and all the hard knocks that brought, but whenever he straightened himself out, because he was schizoaffective also, with all the medication and stuff, he was still self-medicating.
Mm-hmm.
He was self-medicating and any childhood trauma, any issues, any learning disabilities, any adversity in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And so he got to a point where he is self-medicating. And I think they automatically get a bad name because they've done something like this, and then that automatically kind of puts a lens where we aren't really looking at what the problem is, because we're looking more at a decision that was made instead of a collective issue.
Yeah.
So, how many pills do you know? Like, what came about the batch of fentanyl lace Roxy's?
I want to say there were 4 dealers that were apprehended, right?
Okay.
And I don't know, I have a partnership with the DEA, and there is a guy, Agent Wilson, and if I go and do a speaking, a lot of the times I'll run into him because he's also talking about Ty in his case. And he has, just a spreadsheet of, the amount of pills, where the money was being cleaned, within our state.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing people need to understand, is this, like, within our state, But I know just within one of the busts, right, there was like over 600 pills that was seized. And based on the amount of fentanyl that was within Ty's body, I think they estimated that his pill was like 95% fentanyl. I mean, Ty died quick. And so, I want to dart back a little bit to what you're talking about with the decision. Talk about Ty. We work a lot with the Oklahoma Department of Substance Abuse, mental health and substance abuse, because I think it's really important that we all recognize that everybody is. These are people.
100%.
These are people.
Exactly. That gets lost.
I don't know if people know, like,
Right.
These are people with feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
With goals. And what I always tell people is, nobody starts a drug and says, I can't wait for this to ruin my life. That's never, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, that's, not a thought now. And there is a OU professor that I saw at a speaking at Francis Tuttle, and he did a presentation on the mind and what happens with fentanyl, and he said the brain wants what the brain wants, right? And I was dating somebody who he was trying to detox from alcohol, so he got a Xanax, right? Because he didn't want to go to a detox facility. So he got a Xanax, and that Xanax had some fentanyl in it. And it was a high he had never experienced. And so then he needed that. And that kind of got him into it. And there was a little bit of a break from fentanyl, at least to a degree. And then eventually it led him to overdose, you know, a few years later. So this is where the mental health aspect comes into it as well, because I mean, why are people taking a substance to escape?
And
you know,
that's kind of where I'm trying to focus with. We're trying to calm our nervous system. It comes to a point where this is a coping mechanism. We talk about alcohol or drugs or anything that people use. They are numbing themselves from something that they don't want to deal with, something they don't want to feel, whether it's pain, whether it's emotional trauma, no matter what it is. They want the escape from it, from their nervous system. And it's a subconscious need. Once the nervous system knows what that release and that relief feels like, it wants it. And it's not only that, but once they take these drugs and they get all that euphoria, as soon as the euphoria is gone, they're hit slammed with all the stuff they were trying to numb before they took it. So then it's like a roller coaster of ups and downs. And so I think with prescriptions, something that happens, I mean, you speak about substance abuse, is people will be given or overprescribed Oxycontins or Percocets or any kind of anything, and then they will get cut off at some point, and then they seek it from the street.
Right.
But then there are harder drugs like heroin that are less expensive than.
Right.
And so then we get a whole thing of people who get addicted to something harder because it's more affordable.
And you know, there's a whole rabbit hole that I could go down, and I kind of am tempted to, but I won't. And I won't strictly because I'm waiting. There is one woman that has commented something that I had posted about Kratom, and she is this huge Kratom advocate. I'm gonna sit here and say I'm not for or against Kratom, but I need to meet someone that is super for it, right? Because everything I've seen is bad. And we could go get some of that right now from a gas station.
Right,
That's crazy.
Yeah, so the gas station.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to throw that out there because, you know, you're talking about if your doctor cuts you off and you just need pain medicine. That was, I mean, there's so many different things now that they're passing, but let's talk back to fentanyl. You're finding, and this is from my experience with some of the DEA agents that I speak with, you know, they're finding fentanyl in weed vape pens.
Yes.
And I want to also specify it's illicit fentanyl, because there's been a lot of folks that I've met over the years, and God love them, because they're saying it with, you know, almost like a sense of pride. You know, let's say that it's someone giving birth, okay?
Right.
And I had to have a C-section. They told me they were going to give me fentanyl, and I said, you are not giving me fentanyl. And I'm just like, you know, because I don't want to kill that spark in them, but, you know, there's a difference in that illicit fentanyl and that medical, you know, fentanyl. I had worked in oncology, so I'm a phlebotomist, a lab technician, okay? I worked in oncology prior to Ty's passing. So I'm seeing people that are taking fentanyl because they're terminally ill. They have cancer in their bones and they need fentanyl. They're having, you know, it comes in lozenges, it comes in patches, but theirs is being medically, you know, they're being monitored, opposed to some guy that's just mixing some stuff and is like, it's good for who it's for.
And the thing with illicit fentanyl and prescription fentanyl is prescription of fentanyl is monitored by dosage very closely. It still has a high potential to get abused, but it is more, it's less unpredictable. It's more predictable in its dosage.
Right.
So with illicit fentanyl, when they are putting it in literally anything, and it takes, you probably know, it's like a grain of salt amount.
It's insane.
It's a grain of salt amount that can kill a grown man.
Yeah.
So when they are lacing it, you know, they're cutting their drugs with the illicit fentanyl to try to get people more hooked. It's an experimental game for them, just like the people that we used to always hear about cooking drugs in their garage and how dangerous it is for all this stuff. There is no way for us to know what is in a street drug or what is in anything unregulated. And I have to say just about cannabis right now, anybody who's got a medical cannabis card, there are many like gas station type liquor store places that will not card you. And I have to tell you, be so weary of that, because they aren't logging it, which means that you don't know if it has been put through like every system of being tested. So when you're going to the places and they aren't carding you and their stuff is cheaper, it's like, is this an Amazon knockoff? And they aren't putting it in the OMMA system. And so then it's like there's no way to trace to them because they didn't even log it in. Dang. And all our kids are out there at these places getting their knockoff cannabis pen.
Do you remember Spice?
Yes.
You remember when Spice was a thing?
Yeah.
And everybody was like, yeah, Spice. And then all of a sudden they were like, 48 people had seizures this week.
Yeah, or they're eating people's faces off from like
dude, that
the
was a wild,
flocka.
That was a wild time.
Yeah. So my brother had taken flocka before.
Really?
And Spice. And I remember at one point, one relative that we share was like, what are these? And I was like looking through his stuff, and we're like looking on the internet.
Yeah.
But it's before there is many resources as there are now.
Right.
You kind of just don't know what stuff is. But one of the things I think we talk about fentanyl awareness and how we need to be careful about it, but you probably too, we spend a lot of time defending them right off the bat. Like you spent some time, like, I don't know, one of the first things that we're conditioned to do is start defending the decision that they made. And it's like, that is not the problem.
Right.
And so like with the book, because with my brother's book that I wrote, it is all about humanizing him, because at one point he was a child, he was born, he was a toddler, he was a baby, he was somebody before that moment took his life. So trying to get people because you know, have you heard like junk? You hear it in the homeless population more. Oh, they're just junkies. They're just junkies. And it's like, no, they're not just junkies. Do they even get the time of day in their investigations because of their lifestyle? They don't.
Let me tell you, because I am a part of so many different groups, and it's specifically, I think you and maybe I've met 2 or 3 other people who advocate for their sibling. Yeah. Everybody else has like a mom and dad, or a mom or a dad or whatnot. Oh gosh, where was I going with that? Son of a gun.
We gotta chew. We're talking about advocating. Everybody's got.
God bless.
No, I do this.
I know. Well, hang in there.
Yeah, no, I do this all the time. And if I chew, we were talking about advocating and how.
I'm like, what are we talking about?
Sometimes it comes to me, the train of thought.
Oh, that's what I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so behind today. I'm like, man.
You said that they're advocating. You know, 2 people.
I'm with you. Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay, this is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I am a part of a lot of groups on social media and just, right within this whole poisoning community, we'll say. And that's kind of what everybody talks about, how, the amount of people who have had somebody who is like, we'll say a functioning addict, and all of a sudden they are found deceased in the bathroom or something, and the officers come and they say, oh, it's just a drug overdose. And they walk away and they never investigate it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And there's also, this is just a side note, there's also been a few families that I've met where they've seen that their loved one is overdosing, and they call 911, and the ambulance has no Narcan.
Oh, what?
Can you imagine that?
Oh my God.
how unbelievably I would be, yeah. So that's a real deal. Because I guess certain ambulances are contracted out, or there's I don't know. It was a whole thing, and we were like, wow, yeah, I would be devastated over that. Because you did the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
They're alive.
Right.
You called 911. You're doing the right thing. What do you mean there's no Narcan on the ambulance? And what it's going to become is everybody has to learn how to administer Narcan. It's just like CPR.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's not, administering it isn't similar, but you know how everybody is like CPR certified.
Yeah.
Everybody's like encouraged to. Like if you and I went to a restaurant, there's a high chance X amount of people are going to know CPR.
I got you. Right.
You see where I'm at?
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like that's kind of the direction we're leading, right? That we're headed in, is where people are going to have Narcan or know how to administer Narcan. You know, that's just a thought I had.
And then we need to make sure that we go back to remember that we humanize the people who are suffering, and we go back to remembering that they're self-medicating something. And we don't know. It could be anything. We don't know. It could be PTSD. It could be any one of several mental health disorders. And then there's a cycle that happens when you take drugs. It worsens your mental health.
Right.
And then your worsened mental health makes you crave more drugs. And then you can take so many illicit drugs or anything that it gives you, like psychosis sorts.
Yeah.
So,
And I've heard of that too.
so
that's been the whole, and I remember, and I remember this because it hurt my feelings so much. And I don't think it's necessarily why I started doing this, because I started the nonprofit because Ty and I were so close, right? And when we were waiting for the morgue to come and pick him up, and we're all just like standing at the house, like talking to cops. The Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics comes by, and they're quizzing me. They're like, "What drugs has he taken? What's he addicted to? All this stuff." And I'm like, nothing.
He's a 22.
Yeah. I'm like, what do you mean? And they end up telling me about. They said, we think this is a fentanyl, and I'm like, what is fentanyl? You know? And we end up talking to all of my brother's friends, and they're like, we don't know what fentanyl is. So once I start looking into it, I'm like, oh my God, and I'm reading the statistics, and I'm like, Ty, you freaking idiot. And I was like, if he would have known these statistics, and you know, anytime anybody passes, you always sit there and think, you know, maybe if, for example, people that maybe are terminally ill, you sit there and think, well, at least they were expecting it or something, right?
Right.
So I sit here and I'm kind of like, well, maybe if Ty would have known and I would have known he would have known, then it wouldn't hurt me as bad. His death wouldn't have been so bad, because then it would have been like, well, he would have known. Yeah. Now, I don't necessarily know that to be true or not, right? However, I go about things now educating people, so that way, if something happens, they made an educated choice. They knew some risks.
Right, I got you.
Right? And not necessarily saying that to defend their decision or, you know, whatnot, but at least saying, no, they knew. I mean, wear a seatbelt when you're driving, right?
Right.
You know.
We all do different bad decisions. Different
right,
sorts.
exactly. Don't text and drive.
Yeah.
You know. And I mean, if anything, if it happens, I mean, nobody's going to sit there and call them, you know, in any kind of bad name or anything like that, because they were texting and driving. People are going to mourn. Well, why are people sitting there saying, well, they're just some dumb junkie and they deserve to die, whenever, no, that was a real human. You just made a poor choice.
Yeah. With like who has a mom and a dad and siblings and a child and like people who love them.
Yeah.
And don't really, and it is like soul crushing when you hear somebody strip somebody of their humanity. And it's like, listen, he got dealt a card that would have been impossible for anybody to navigate without substance abuse.
Right.
I mean, you know, I'm not making excuses for it. I'm not condoning it, but it comes down to self-medicating.
Yeah.
Self-medicating. And so when we try to help people with their mental health, and we focus on like their mental health and coping skills and things that they can do instead so they can feel the relief from something besides substance, I think for me, that's my bottom line, is that please don't turn to the substance. Like, get the warm hug from yourself, from, you know, from something besides the substance, because we have to reframe how we're calming our nervous system.
Right.
And we can't. So here's the thing with addiction: an alcoholic or a drug addict, they have a problem. They are using a substance to band-aid the problem.
Mm-hmm.
When they take the substance away, the problem is still here.
And now probably a little worse.
And worse, because then you have to go back and deal with all the stuff that you did in your addiction.
Right.
But when you don't deal with the problem, but the substance is gone, like that is still somebody who is suffering with the internal thoughts of using or relapse or a dry drunk or a dry addict who's acting in the same ways. So I'm like, we have to talk about mental health, we have to talk about trauma, we have to talk about humanizing them.
And you know, Ty's death made the news, right? So their death, it made the news, and someone called me and they said, hey, don't look at the comments. And I was like, okay, yeah. So I went and looked at the comments. I did. And I was skimming through it, you know, hey, I remember him, great athlete. A few more, natural selection.
Oh, yeah.
And when I read that, I was just like,
you're ready to go mama bear and like tear people
I thought, you don't know who you're talking about. Ty emceed the Special Olympics for the school. Okay?
Yeah.
My brother was 4 times the human I ever have been. I mean, my brother was solid. And, and so it really sucked to have seen that, because I thought, what a closed-minded person. So I feel like that kind of fueled me in advocacy as well, because, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
And ultimately, one thing that I also really try to express is, 1 second. Is that we're not going to be able to, it's not going to go away, especially not in our state, because we're right in the middle of the nation.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, you can blame all the other countries for the deaths in America, the deaths in Oklahoma. Ty's death specifically, the DEA managed to track all that back to the exact cartel and location in Mexico where his came from. However, let it be known that just like meth labs, Obion is busting fentanyl labs in Oklahoma too. Yeah. The reality of it is, and what I've heard some of the DEA agents talk about at some of these different conferences, is you and I, let's say you have an oxy prescription, okay? And I can go get some baby powder, I can get some Tylenol, you and I can Amazon purchase pill press. Somehow, I'm assuming black market, I don't know, we can get fentanyl sent from like China or something, or I don't know, ask somebody around here and they'll teach us how to make it. I don't know. And we just mix it up and press it and then say, hey, and we're like really bumping up our profit by cutting it all. Or screw it, let's not even use any of your Oxycontin. Let's just use this fentanyl and Tylenol.
Yep.
Press that bad boy. This is something that I make sure to tell high schoolers, is because they're like, hey, you know, yeah, I can distribute some pills, I can do whatever. You go to jail for murder now. Yeah. Like the kid who gave the other kid who died, right? The pills, he was on trial for murder, right? It was him and then the 3 other guys, but one of the men died of COVID in jail. So that's what prevented those 4 people from getting charged with murder. So that's a fun fact.
How many people died from that? Like just Ty, his friend?
Just Ty and his friend.
Okay. I was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, from, you know, that.
That's enough.
Right, but like from like that bulk batch, I have no idea. Yeah. You know, I just know that after like maybe 3, you know, apprehensions, you know, a minimum of like 600 pills were seized or something. So they were like, you know, at the time we're newly grieving. Yeah. You know, so people are like, you just saved 600 lives, and we were like, awesome, my brother's funeral's in a week. Yeah. You know, it didn't mean as much as it does now. And now it means something, but also I'm not saying that I'm not hopeful, right? That
Right.
things will get better. The only thing we can do is just educate people on it.
For sure. That is it, because prevention starts with awareness. It has to. It has to. So, all right, well, I enjoyed this. Maybe we do it again.
I think it was pretty fair.
Yeah, that was fun.
pretty good
That
for
was
her.
good. I know, we first met, we just met today. Like, we talked a little bit online, and yeah, so I think that was pretty good. Is there anything that you want to, like, tie in?
Yes. And you know what, also, I did pretty good for working all day.
You did, really
There was
good.
only a few times where I was like,
No.
man, where am I right now?
Yeah.
I do want to encourage anybody that's watching this, Talk About Ty, the nonprofit that I run for illicit fentanyl and overdose prevention. It is www.talkaboutty.org. If you go to that, up in the right corner, you'll be able to have a drop-down tab, and it'll say services on it, and that's going to show the partnerships that I have. One is with the 988, right? So I put that information and that link on there. So if anybody is struggling with, depression, anxiety, any of these different things, I highly encourage you, click on that 988 link, and that'll take you to a whole other resource. There's also the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. The link on there is okayimready.org. You click on that link, it'll take you to that web page where you can actually click on naloxone and type in your address and zip code, and they will send you a free box of Narcan to your house. If you didn't know, now you do. And then the third link, or third partnership that we have, is going to be with the DEA. So that link is going to be One Pill Can Kill. You click on that and it will end lifetime. I think I looked at it right before we started, and I think it was last updated on the 19th of May. And I want to say it said like 33 million or billion pills have been seized, and so many pounds. It's really incredible, and I highly, highly recommend that you check out, honestly, all three of those. They're great resources, and it's going to be really helpful. But
And I post the table of contents for my books that has domestic violence. It has every hotline number. And also my inbox is used for safe spaces if anybody is in a crisis. Also, Don't Pull the Trigger 143 on Instagram is where I run that safe space. And I also have a website, ElysiumEvermore.com, and I'm in the process of nonprofiting for suicide and fentanyl awareness, but we'll see.
Look at
So
you.
maybe she'll help me figure out my FAQs.
Excellent.
So
So now the hardest thing is, now you got to get up and go hit that stop button.